From the high desert of northern New Mexico, this is Circle for Original Thinking. I am your host, Glenn Aparicio Parry. Welcome to Circle for Original Thinking, America's electronic talking circle for visionary thinkers, an open forum for fresh ideas and timeless wisdom applied to today's political and ecological challenges. Each episode, we bring together creative thinkers from a variety of different traditions. We ask the hard questions on the important issues of the day, political polarization, climate change, virulent viruses, other symptoms of humanity being out of balance with the natural world. Our goal is to recreate a whole and sacred America and world, a new and improved version of E Pluribus Unum, from the many to the one, and this time not leave anybody out. Join us as we embark on this quest. Today I'm joined by one of my dear friends. I knew him for many years as Bill Pfeiffer. Now he goes by Sky Otter, which is a beautiful name, which captures some of the Father Sky, Mother Earth, and something serious, something playful. Thank you, thank you. You know, we're going to be talking about so many things, but I would say this: nature is our original teacher. And the poet David Whyte, he said, if you pay attention to the world, you suddenly realize that the world is paying attention back to you. So how we show up in the world determines the experience we get back. The quality of our attention is key. If we show up in the world with our hearts open, overflowing in gratitude, our inner and outer worlds can be transformed. If we love the landscape, she will love us back and teach us how to express that love with all the beings we share the land with. So our experience can become one of mutual reciprocity, respect, and kinship. You know, Sky Otter is the author of the forthcoming book, Our Sacred Landscape, an Animist Field Guide to Any Terrain, which I've had the pleasure of reading about half of it so far, and it's beautiful. We will discuss his new book, and we'll also discuss my new book, which is Original Love, the Timeless Source of Wholeness, in some kind of free-flowing conversation on love, gratitude, and intention in a troubled world. Now, let me introduce my guest. I already mentioned Sky Otter, formerly known as Bill Pfeiffer, is the founder of the Sacred Nerf. That's a very interesting word. Wonder what that is. Combination of Nerf ball and Earth? I don't know. Sacred Earth Network, which has implemented leading edge visions for over 25 years. In that time, Sky Otter went to Russia so many times. I thought it was 48 times. Maybe it's 44 times. And so it's really one of his second homes, and also the Southwest is as well, maybe his third home, I don't know. And he's been assisting the environmental and indigenous movements over in Siberia through the Sacred Earth Network. And this has given him a rare cross-cultural perspective. He also facilitates hundreds of spiritual ecology workshops, including vision quests, men's councils, and breathwork sessions. He has 25 years of experience in the reevaluation, counseling, and Vipassana meditation, and has undergone extensive training, as I mentioned before, with Siberian shamans. He's partnered with a lot of people, including Joanna Macy, John Perkins, Lynn Roberts, there's John Seed. Those are some pretty heavy hitters. Joanna Macy's now in the spirit world, but she could still join us here today. I mean, she's still in Bill's heart, in my heart. That's the thing, the ancestors don't go away. He also has extensive experience in the Southwest, as I was mentioning, with grandfather Leon Secretero, a dear elder to both of us, and that's where we were blessed to meet. So his first book was Wild Earth, Wild Soul, a manual for an ecstatic culture. And this book is called Our Sacred Landscape, an Animist Field Guide for Any Terrain. Welcome. Welcome, Bill Sky Otter. I'm going to probably call you Bill Sky Otter sometimes, and I hope you don't mind.
That's
But,
absolutely fine, Glenn.
uh, okay, okay. I wanted to begin by just telling a little story that I first heard from Dave Abram. You just asked me about Dave Abram recently. So, it was in a 2004 dialogue. I believe it was 2004 dialogue. Dave was there at the Seed Institute, and Leroy Little Bear was asking questions, questions like how did the first awareness arise, and which morphed into how did the original awareness arise. And Dave told a story that made a big impression on me, and I think it would on you. And since you're writing a book on our sacred landscape, this story came to mind. I don't know if it's possible that you even have this story in the book because I didn't get to read every page. But and it goes like this: it's a story he tells about a king, and a king that wanted to. Have you heard this story?
No,
No, good. Okay,
I
it's a
don't think so.
king who wanted to commission a map of the whole kingdom. And so he got together the finest cartographers in the land, all the men and all the women cartographers that knew the land inside and out. And he commissioned this map to be a map of the whole realm. And they went to work on it, for a very long time. This various workmen and workwomen were working away on this map. And they used the finest pigments, and they made a pretty large map, and it was about 6 feet, 6 feet by 6 feet, and they brought it into the castle, and they said and it included a lot of some of the landscapes there, the Pyrenees and the major mountains in Europe there, and they asked the king, "How do you like the map?" And he says, "Well, that's a very fine map." But then he keeps looking at it. He says, "But where are my mountains?" And they said, "What do you mean, Your Highness? We have the major mountains. We have the Alps. We have the Pyrenees." He says, "No, no, these mountains, I look outside of my window. I look at them every day." And he says, "No." They say, "No, Your Highness, those are not mountains. Those are hills. And we don't have those on the map." He says, "Well, they must be on the map. These are my mountains." So they go back. They say, "Okay, all right." So they go back into the workshop. They work away for another like month, 2 months, and then and finally they come back with a map that this time is. They can barely get it inside the castle. I mean, it's like, 15, 20 feet by 20 feet. It's a gigantic map. It's hard to get it in the door. So I think they didn't even get it in the door. They put it outside in the front area, and they look at that map and they say, "You see, Your Highness, we have your mountains now on the map, and we named them after you. Are, does this meet your satisfaction?" And he says, well, yeah, but where's the house I was born? Where's the house I was born?" And they say, "What? You were born of humble origins, Your Highness. If we were to put the house where you were born on, we wouldn't have room for anything else. How could we possibly do that?" He says, "You're going to have to put the house where I was born on the map." And so now they go back the workmen and workwomen go back and they work on this map for about a year because and they have put every single detail on the map now. They have every tree, every snag, everything in the entire village. The only problem is it is exactly the size of the kingdom itself. So in order to lay out this map, they have to cut down everything, cut down the trees, cut down this, cut down that. Then they put themselves on the map and they laid the map out over the entire kingdom and they said, "Isn't this wonderful? We are living on the map." And but then what happened was the rains came and it started to kind of like crimp up the map and make the map, start to bleed and change. And then some after the rain, some little shoots and live shoots were coming up through the map, and the people were saying, "What's this stuff? What is this? What is this stuff?" And and Dave told that story because that's where he felt we were at in a certain way with our rational mind had covered over the natural world. Our, our rational mind had made such a map of the territory that we no longer were able to connect to the land. So this story came to mind because you're doing something in your book which is extraordinary in that you're seeking to keep both of these vibrations alive. The idea of mapping the terrain is okay, but you seem to be doing it with so much heart. So I'd like you to take off, and pardon the length of the story, but I'd like you to take off from there to comment on how that feels to you, and vis-a-vis your book, your beautiful book that you're writing.
Thank you, Glenn. That was a great introduction on all levels. I love that David Whyte poem, and I love David Whyte, and just the way I look at this conversation is that it's an opportunity for both of us to, in our own humble way, talk about love and in as many of its manifestations, or you can't really talk about it, but you can look at it in some way and you can feel it. And the reason I'm starting this way is that you said something like, um, your book involves mapping and it's written with a lot of heart. And my objective is super simple with the book, as always, in terms of what you said before we started this conversation about nature being our teacher. As far as I'm concerned, nature is love. Like, we just have these silly words that we use, but nature is love, love is nature. And when I was writing this book, it's kind of, I think you've already said it, but the major impulse was, we're living in a miracle. We've been given everything. It's totally divine here. This is the Garden of Eden. And as you were saying, our rational minds, our ego mind of separation, whatever you want to call it, uh, we're amnesiacs. We have forgotten where we are. And so, the major impulse is for us to notice this landscape imbued, made out of, made from love. in a million beautiful expressions. And boy, can we relax and play with that perception that all of a sudden, you just want to go, let's just sigh, and not take ourselves so seriously. So I think, just to conclude this kind of opening um, response to your question, it's like we get an opportunity to relax and be at peace when we take the blinders off and see where we truly are. And that simple and innocent childlike perception of nature opens our heart up again. And yeah, I think the thing about nature is if you get 25 politicians with very different polarizing views together, if if you can sort of calm them down enough to just say, hey, can you notice that daffodil over there and that beautiful peregrine falcon, and the river that's flowing in front of us. They're all, unless they're completely lost it, they will all find a common ground, and that's our common ground as humans. So, uh, you know, sometimes we can overcomplicate things, and this love of the land and this um, reintegrating, remembering, that's the best word,
Hmm.
remembering our embeddedness in the natural world it can seem so philosophical, and it's just so basic, our fundamental love of the earth. And so it's, again, to repeat, this is a common ground, and my prayer is that we can unify around what is sustaining life.
Um, but I do want you to address this idea of mapping. How can mapping be used in a positive way? Because I know I took a glimpse toward the end of your book. You came up again. Um, um, how how because it seems like you're in one of the when you do these sacred landscape classes, you you encourage people. I mean, I assume most of these classes are in person, right? But so then you're working with the land that in Vermont, but you also encourage people to go back to their homelands and then become familiar with their territory, like in a 25-mile radius or something around their home. Um, so so how do they do that? What is their relationship with mapping of that? I mean, how does
Okay,
it shift? Yeah, yeah.
so like the story of the king, this mapping is really a relatively small part of the overall process. But nevertheless, when you think about it, most modern people, especially most Americans who are running around all over the place and moving constantly, really don't know where they are. If you really think about it, it's like they have a house, but it's all just scenery or places to get to, and everything I've learned from my native elders is intimacy with the landscape. And there's absolutely nothing wrong um, in drawing that out. So people draw out what they consider to be their sacred landscape, and that process may that might happen very quickly for some people, and it might take the entire course or longer for people to determine what is their sacred landscape. But the idea is, again, this intimacy, of which mapping is a relatively small part. To quote the fellow who I interviewed, Walker Corby, in the Geography as Poetry chapter, he
Mm.
wants to learn how to become his place. And that is, let's say one of the key objectives of the course is to become your place, like to know it so intimately on so many different levels, that you'll do anything to protect it. I mean, if I were to look at it with a goal in mind, which I'm satisfied with people just falling in love with where they live, because the process of discovering what is right around them all the time, I have seen numerous times, people are just thoroughly amazed to sort of given permission to explore and, if you will, make love with the land that they live
Yeah, yeah,
in.
yeah, yeah. That's good. Reminds me of. Did you ever meet Jesse Wolf Hardin? You
Yeah,
ever,
yeah, I've met a
yeah, yeah. I took Tomoko down to his land, which is near Reserve, New Mexico. I have no idea if he's still there. Actually, I haven't been in touch for years, but you had to cross the San Francisco River 7 times to get to where he said it was like 3 canyon miles, but it took a very long time to actually get there. And he used to speak in those same kind of terms, like, you always walk barefoot on the land. He said, I mean, you're making love to Mother Earth. He says, you don't want to use an intermediary, it's not like use a condom or something. That's probably what he said, but, yeah, no, what a being. I remember going out I took him out to a restaurant in Albuquerque that used to be near the old Sheridan. It's not there anymore, including the Sheridan. It's not there anymore either. But it was a restaurant that had all oil lamps or something. And his first reaction was, "Thank you so much for taking me back to my century." So it's like that's the way Jesse was. But I got a question for you, because a lot of our listeners or viewers, when I've been going on tour with the book Original Love, and I'm expressing love as integral to nature, and how, I'm talking about how the mountains are in love with the valleys. They attract the clouds, bring the rain, and then of course the rain flows from the mountains down into the valleys. So in a sense, the mountains are looking over the valleys. They're taking care of the valleys. I talk about how the waters of the earth, all of them, because I learned this from the Hopi, are in relationship with each other. And like, to me, it's like the water in the sky, which Paula Gunn Allen once told me is where, if you want to find water in New Mexico, look up, because the water's held in the sky so much. And she said, well, and it's like the waters in the sky in those clouds are in love with the underground waters, and they're writing letters to each other, like love letters. And so they're in communication, and when the groundwater is dry, it like calls down the rain, which we just had so delightfully in the last couple of days here. So But when I go on tour, people will say to me, "Oh, but what about the fact that in nature everybody's eating everything else?" Which almost sounds like what Woody Allen would say in a movie, about, nature is a big restaurant or something. I think he said that in one of his movies. So, this idea of this dog eat dog or survival of the fittest, how do you address people who see the natural world that way?
Before I respond to that, Glenn, I want to say that everything you were just saying about um, the relationships of the various parts of the natural world, and um, it's a mythic understanding, and it's an understanding of deep interconnection of everything. And when I was listening to you, I thought, yep, we have this common elder teacher that we love so much on the other
Yeah.
side, Leon Secatero, and that he would be proud of his son, Glenn, his adopted son, Glenn, to be speaking in that way. And that he and all the native elders who acted so courageously and generously with non-natives to teach us what is so critical. I think that they said to themselves, well, they either learn this stuff or they're sunk. And I think that what you were saying is so still so nascent in the overall um, zeitgeist or worldview of humanity right now, but it's so critically important. And I think I didn't want to just, race through to the second part about the so-called dog eat dog world without emphasizing how, we've been students of the native way for some time, but I can't stop hearing it enough. And that I just thought that was very, very eloquent. And I love the way you put it with the mountains looking with love over the valleys. Who's to say otherwise? So, as far as the dog eat dog and everything eats everything. I mean, dog eat dog is a judgment, but everything does eat everything, and we happen to be at the top of the food chain, and it's like that's the setup right now on Mother Earth. So it's not like, oh, I have to have this sort of there is that school in India, the Hisma school, the Jainists, I believe,
Oh
that
yeah. My
they're
favorites.
operating from essentially don't the microbes on your skin are something that you need to watch out for because there are other life forms. And I think the intent behind that, which is to be super conscious of the rest of the natural world and treat it with kindness, is beautiful. And it's about as far away from where we are now as we can be. And we eat other beings, and other beings, you know, eat other beings to survive. That's the setup right now. So I don't think that there's any problem with having this really beautiful, divine, loving perception and knowing that that's going on. Like, I think it's how we do that, how we go about doing that. And we have a long, long way to to go with that. And I discussed this um, in detail in the mammals chapter of my book.
Do you want to elaborate more, or I can play off because it's
um, I just remember a very powerful story by the Ojibwe author, elder, academic, quite brilliant man, Anton Troyer, and
mm.
his story about his son Isaac in the cultural toolbox and how he went about hunting a deer and, praying before and after and laying the tobacco down and telling that deer spirit going to use every single part of that deer and really recognize that you just take so many deer. You don't take all of them. And the current extractive paradigm we live in, it pretty much wants to take all the deer and then some. And there's just a big, big difference between those two ways of going about things.
Oh dear,
Oh
that's
dear.
bad. I'm, that's a joke, Bill. Okay, sorry. So anyway, never mind. But anyway, I let's talk about the dog eat dog thing. First of all, I've never seen a dog eat another
Yeah.
dog. I mean, have you? But seriously, there's a few things that bother me about that, like the from one perspective, I happen to know, and I know it's probably should be in some Trivial Pursuit game, but it wasn't until the fifth edition of The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin that the phrase "survival of the fittest" ever appeared, because it was Herbert Spencer's phrase, and Darwin didn't really think quite like that. He really understood. He was pretty cool with the animals, cool with the critters. He was, he understood they had emotions. He understood their society in a way that I appreciate, actually. So he did not have this detached scientific worldview. And I think it was just that concept, survival of the fittest, was appropriated by social Darwinists to kind of structure society. And that's something we could get into, and we could probably talk about, you and I have talked about in some detail about how, that's really having to do with, it gives cover to the wealthy to be actually unkind, because they're saying, oh, we're just looking out for number one. Which is it's not really the way nature works, because it's very cooperative. It's highly cooperative. Everybody is watching everything else, and they're making adjustments, and they're living quite harmoniously. Yes, they eat other beings, but even that, my Aborigine friends of like Paul Callahan and Uncle Paul Gordon, they were saying to me, and it's in their books too, that when you eat another animal or something, then you're taking on that energy. You're taking on that energy. And that's why, like you were just, pointing out, why you make a prayer and you're connecting with the whole spirit of the animal before you ever partake of that animal. Somehow it becomes part of you. And we are completely interconnected with everything. So, we're 3% of our body weight is bacterial, and more than 50% of our cells. I mean, it's our DNA. It's so-called our so-called human DNA is actually mixed up with everything. So it makes some sense to me, at least, if we start to think of ourselves as interconnected beings. But we often don't do that, because, if you have this worldview where the outside world is dangerous, or there's something you have to overcome or conquer, then you're looking at it entirely differently. And I think that's the biggest problem, and that's the biggest. You've gotten past that. and you're really adept at that, and I honor you for that because you know how to live in the natural world, and you lead these wilderness guide retreats, and you're teaching people from the heart how to make this heartfelt connection with not just the land, also with the people on the tour, and that's pretty amazing work. So I think you had something you wanted to share from my book. Is this an appropriate time, or
Let
I have
me
no idea
respond
what
to
it is, though.
let me respond, and then we'll jump into your book. So,
Okay, sure.
um, one of I loved every chapter I wrote in the book. And by the way, I just want to clarify the title: "Our Sacred Landscape: An Animist Field Guide for Any Terrain." And so, part of "for any terrain" is that perceiving Earth, universe, the world as alive, and as Leon said in your book, it's it's made of sound and creation is made out of sound and vibration. Um, when you not just think that's a cool idea, but you really explore it and feel it and experience it, then there's no fear around the dog eat dog thing, and there's no danger anymore because it's all energy flow. It's all, in some ways, there's no death. It's like you are flowing in this interpenetrating universe on all levels, and you can just relax and move into that.
Hmm.
And so what I was going to say is I couldn't choose a favorite chapter, and I won't, but I loved writing about the plants. Now think about the plants. They are essentially the dominant species on the earth, but how do they dominate, quote unquote? They do it through cooperation, and they do it through uh, a kind of still persistence and incredible communication, and the deepest ancestral knowledge. So, I think that I say something like, be like a plant. So if this, if this conversation helps people to say, well, maybe I want to move away from this dog eat dog world and learn how to be a plant and see what that means, it'll be a victory. So anyway, that's my spiel on what you were, cooperation is the name of the game. And I think we're going to keep learning as a species that there is a room for competition, but that cooperation is the name of the game. Um,
I really agree, and I often say that the only conspiracy I am certain exists is the conspiracy between mammals and plants and trees.
right.
So there, because the word conspiracy comes from conspire, which means to breathe together, and that's what we're doing with the plants, with the trees, and the phytoplankton. We are breathing together with them. They give out what we need to breathe in, and we breathe out what they need to breathe in. So it's like, yeah, no, plants, we're way more like plants than people realize. And so I really appreciate that you're writing from that perspective. And I think but how do you get through to people who use phrases, which I consider insulting phrases, like, oh, that person, he had some kind of neurological condition, and now he's just a vegetable.
Yeah.
What do you say when somebody says something like that?
Well, we have a long way to go. I think this is a really good place to segue into. page 88 of your book. And it's part of the chapter called Love in Modern Times. Um,
Oh,
and you can read along with me. It's the first full paragraph. Um, and you write, it is not only a fear of not being loved that most of us share. Fears about love are often rooted in deeper original wounds, uncertainties, and insecurities in our life. We are afraid of loneliness, of having no one to depend upon as we grow older. We are intimidated by the prospect of loss, sickness, and death. We feel we can't control our fate. If a loved one is very ill or we live in a dangerous area of the world engaged in war, political upheaval, our fears can be compounded, stretching our capacity to cope. Um, and then I just went down a sentence in the topic change. Romantic love is part of a much larger force. And you go on to say, when we do this, getting locked into the typical view of romance, we become overly dependent upon our spouse, lover, or family member to fulfill all our emotional needs. No one person or persons can do that for us. So why of all the chapters did I just pick that one up and decided that I felt it was really worthy of us to spend a little bit of time conversing? And I think it's because um, not only romantic relationships, but all human relationships are fraught, and they're more fraught in some ways than they've ever been. And the way they become unfraught is when one or both parties are really able to uh, open their heart. And they open their heart because they have perceived the situation or the loved one in a different way. And so I believe that the what you said and what I think we can't say enough of is that but hamstringing romantic love or just making romantic love into what love is, it's a big problem, and that the love we can feel in romantic love is part of this infinite source of love, the love in our hearts. So my point here, Glenn, is that we have the keys. Nobody else can do this for us. And that by understanding our own power to love, by opening our hearts, we we have a whole different relationship to our fellow human. And isn't that the issue at hand in some ways? Like, isn't it's a really it's in a sense a human created problem, and our hatred is just a closed heart. So I could go on, but I'm just really I wanna like emphasize, because it's incredibly true for myself, that I need to consistently do the inner work of um, finding out where my heart can be open even more, or what can I let pass through that may be painful, that I need to let go of, who do I need to forgive, and finally a kind of, yeah, an inventory of my relationships so that I'm keeping as many of my dear relationships at an optimal level, that I'm not just going, oh, he owes me 10,000 bucks back in 1962. He hasn't, he just didn't give me $5 yet or even mention it. I hate his guts, so I'm not, like that kind of thinking. It's a joke on one level, but how many people are harboring resentments like that?
ah, yeah. Well, that's something that I did discuss in fair detail in the book Original Love, because Most of the book and most of my worldview, like most of your worldview, I think we're aligned like this, is really putting forth understanding that love and gratitude are primary forces in the cosmos. So we're grateful, and we've learned from that's the irony. We've learned from indigenous people like Leon, and Leon used to pray to the West and be thankful to the ancestors and for everything that had happened to bring him to this moment in time. So this is the same person that in his lineage suffered the long walk and, the Navajo people being rounded up from Canyon de Chelly and walk 300 miles east to Fort Sumner. And so, which is similar to the Cherokee Trail of Tears, and a lot of people died along the way. I'm not trying to equate those two, but they're both horrific chapters in our history. And yeah, but Leon was very positive. He was always positive, and we tend to be positive. And it seems to me that the natural world is very loving. It is very cooperative, largely. Um, and and love is what evokes wholeness. Love is what brings us in touch with this bigger force, this greater force. I love what you just said about, yes, our romantic relationship. It's part of it. It's part of the whole thing, and it can open us up to that larger whole. But we also, we have to speak for the people that feel love has been a trickster figure to them, like they've loved and then it's been torn away, and they feel so hollowed out. They feel lost, maybe because they've lost their love of this other person. Generally, it's a person,
Yeah.
sometimes a dog or a cat, something like that, but it can be. People do feel that real strongly. But there's something there they they actually can get very much deeper into love by getting going deeper into their loss, going deeper, even perhaps even the grudge, feel what is the real reason I feel something like this? What is really going on here? To examine it a little bit more closely, then that grief or that loss or even the grudge maybe becomes a teacher to the person and reveals something that they never considered. And I did write about forgiveness because I learned from Basil Braveheart that it really there's no word for forgiveness in Lakota, that it's really about awakening to one's own sacred divinity. And I think that's what the whole process is. I mean, we are, and your work, I'm so grateful to you because your work allows people to awaken to the land. First of all, it's super important to the landscape, and that awakens their soul somehow, and they begin to experience life in a different way. Almost as if they put on different lenses completely, and they experience it more directly, more passionately, and that's going to affect everything. That's going to absolutely affect everything. So I'm just I'm amazed, but I want to turn. May sound crazy, but I want to, in the remaining time we have, another 10 minutes or so. I would like to
Can
talk
I
about.
interrupt you for a quick appreciation, or
Oh,
am
all
I going
right.
to mess up your train of thought?
No, no, you won't.
Okay, so um, I love the way you call me brother, brother Bill Sky Otter. Glenn, you're my brother. And as I was listening, I was thinking, I just heard from my friend, her name is Hart, and she says, it's Joaquin Phoenix's mom, by the way.
Oh,
So anyway, Hart says to me, this I love you thing is definitely lacking. What it really is I feel terrific when I'm in your presence. That's what is a beautiful way to express it. So I feel terrific in your presence, Glenn, and I love where we're coming from and how even in a formal conversation like this, an educational forum, if you will, we get a chance to be affectionate brothers to one another and actually, model the what it is that we're talking about. So I just really appreciate you so much. I loved rereading your book and keep it coming. I understand that you were saying in these book talks you've been giving that they become a love fest. And it's like, what could be more important?
Well, they do become a love fest, but there's one other thing. This is what I wanted to talk about with you, though. It was on February 28th. I was in Taos, so that was one of the biggest love fest of all because I've lived in Taos before and I know people there. And we had like 45, 50 people there that were very just really loving. And it was, but at that gathering, Jeff Mishlove introduced me. And it happened to be, February 28th happened to be the first day the Iran war broke out. So he asked me about, you know, uh, uh, war. He asked me about that war. He asked me about hate. He asked me about why humans are carrying this in their hearts still. And although I don't really think of hate as being the opposite of love. I don't think love even has an opposite, actually. So it includes it all. But it did make me think a lot about love and war. And I picked up James Hillman's book, the Terrible Love of War. And in that, Hillman delves into the mythology of war and why, Mars, the god of war, has a lot of love affair for Venus, the god of love. And I can't quarrel with James in at least for the since the middle of the Bronze Age on, it seems like that's been the way it's been. That since 1250 BC, humanity has been had this strange affection and attraction to war. So I just want to know from you, my dear brother, do you think that we can get past this? Because, like Joseph Rael used to speak about, let's let the war gods go home. Is there an awakening for humanity to get past war and re-embrace what apparently we were a very long time ago, at least according to Rian Eisler and Marija Gimbutas and stuff? We were more peaceful. We had more of a partnership with not just the natural world, but with each other. Is that possible? What are your thoughts on that in these days?
Great question, Glenn. Yes, I do believe that. I have felt enough love in different ways uh, to know that um, the recognition of our shared being, our shared life, the shared one life, that shared nature is, that's flipping the switch. So as long as you're an other, as long as you're considered an enemy in some way, I can make war on you. Number one. Number two, as you didn't say this part about what Hillman was talking about, but I think it's essential, which is that we go to war because it may be the most enlivening experience. It might
Yeah,
be
that's
this
right.
sense of like finally, it was kind of boring. I was caught up in the future and the past, and now my life, I've got to really be in the present moment now, or I'm a dead duck. So so what we all want really is aliveness in the present moment. And so the more we can see how it's life itself that we're wanting to feel much more fully, um, then we can move away from the war game. Do I think it's going to happen tomorrow? I don't think so. But what I love about these kind of conversations, and this is even more to your point, the gods of war, Glenn, and the gods of commerce, the gods of extraction, all want to keep us thinking it's hopeless, that this is quote unquote human nature, and that we have to slaughter each other in order to be human. And I think that's nonsense. And I feel the presence of, yeah, the presence of the ancestors, the sages, the saints, all, and Mother Earth herself rising up and just saying no more war. And it's
Mhm.
it's not a no, it's a yes to life. It's like there's so much more that we can do here creatively on Mother Earth instead of hacking each other to bits.
Oh my God. I just love everything you're saying now. And I think you're really getting at the key issue, aliveness in the present moment. Being present, breathing in, conscious breathing, um, conscious love has to do with presence. It happens to be how I ended my book. I mean, it's undivided presence of original love, because that's where I was coming to too. It also reminds me, strangely, maybe because I have this lateral consciousness, but I probably never shared with you, but I used to be a hypnotist. I mean, I was a trained hypnotist, this many, many years ago in California, and and a lot of people would come that wanted to stop smoking, right? Okay, and there's two ways to get clients to stop smoking, and one of the most effective ways in terms of getting somebody to stop smoking, I also would consider very unethical and unhelpful. Okay, so some hypnotists charge a ton of money, right? Because well, all that means is the people have already invested a lot of money, so they're gonna come there. Of course, they're more likely to quit because they've invested so much, and then they can point to their success rate. But they also sometimes put somebody in a trance, and they'll give a negative cue while someone's in a trance. They'll give a negative cue. So like you're thinking about smoking a cigarette just as you step in a pile of dog shit or something,
Yeah.
something like that. That's the thing. But there's another way. There's an ethical way to help somebody stop smoking, and it goes just to what you're talking about. And that's about, in a trance, you teach them how to consciously breathe, how to be consciously comfortable in their own skin, how to consciously be in their body and enjoy it, and to enjoy the natural world around them, and to take in all these sights. All this stuff is about being alive, being fully present. And it's possible to learn this. And so if it's possible for people to learn this, it's possible for us, all humanity as a species, perhaps, to get to this place and maybe put the war gods home. Man, we could talk for hours and
Yeah.
hours, and I would like to, and we'll maybe have another session. But I think is there something else you wanted to say before we can?
No, I love it, and I think that I know we're on the right track here, Glenn. And as I said before, I'm grateful for you, and you listen to your guidance, your vision with Tomoko about the trilogy, and that
Hmm.
original love had to be the third of the trilogy. And it's just so important right now. I think there's a way that we can fluff up this whole thing, make it superficial. There's nothing more important than this conversation, so keep it up.
Thank you. Thank you very much, my dear brother Bill. My brother Sky Otter. Okay, and may you continue to prosper and just love life and be joyful and playful in everything you do. Thank you. This program is made possible in part by Select Books, Waterside Publications, BizGenix, and the Ecology Prime Media Channel. Executive producer Kenichi Sugihara. Scheduling coordinator Kim Chappell, and she does more than coordinate schedules, so I really want to shout out to Kim. Native flute music by Orlando Secatero from the Pathways CD. Liberty Song by artist Ron Crowder, written by Ron Crowder, Jim Casey, and Danny Casey. Post-production editing by Kenichi Sugihara. The Circle for Original Thinking is a grassroots think tank whose mission is to seek out the deep origins of contemporary thought in order to remember and restore, sometimes we say restory, heart-centered wisdom for humanity and all our relations on earth. Follow this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Listen Notes, or wherever podcasts are normally heard. For more information, the easiest website for me is originalthinking.us. And that's where you can find my books, Original Thinking, Original Politics, and the aforementioned Original Love, which is the third in the trilogy. Thank you for listening, and until next episode, many blessings of good health, well-being to all. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. And I think that's it. I don't know if Kim is still